Welcome, everyone. If this is your first time joining us, this is Outside the Lines, a coloring night live with AEIVA. We are the Abrams Engel Institute for the Visual Arts. We're the visual arts center located on the campus of the University of Alabama at Birmingham. We present 8 to 10 exhibitions a year, highlighting a mix of regionally, nationally, and internationally acclaimed artists, focused almost exclusively on contemporary art. We serve a diverse audience of university faculty and staff, but also artists, museum patrons, and donors. We help represent the visual arts at UAB to local and regional institutions, but also the national and international art community, while simultaneously striving to keep our exhibitions directly relevant and engaging to our surrounding Birmingham communities. Since opening in 2014, AEIVA has been featured in publications such as New York Times, Huffington Post, Nation, Raw Vision Magazine, PBS Canvas, and we are very proud that our exhibitions and related educational programming are free and open to the public, such as this Outside the Lines Coloring Night. So my name's Christina. I am the education manager and one of your hosts for the evening. A quick shout out to any of our students on the call. This coloring night was an idea that was born from our Student Arts Council, and we look forward to all of their contributions in the spring semester. They've got a lot of great events coming up, so really excited for all of those. This is a monthly event that we do, the coloring nights. This is the next to last one for the semester. The last one will feature the graduating seniors of our BFA program, the Bachelor of Fine Arts degree, and that will take place at a new date as decided today. It's actually going to be on April 14th, which is the second Thursday in the month of April instead of the first April. So we'll be sending out an announcement about that soon, but it'll be April 14th at 7 p.m. Also, if you're interested, we have upcoming events next week on Tuesday, which is spoken word, and chamber music on Thursday. Both of those are in person. But if you have families, this Saturday, we will have Art Plays Women in the Arts Family Day at AEIVA as well. So lots of fun things happening this spring. Before we get on to this event, though, a quick few housekeeping notes. Please note that discriminatory or hate language of any kind will not be tolerated. The session is being recorded, but no, the recordings are largely the screen shares. So we want to encourage you, if you feel comfortable with it, to turn on your screens. This is a night to decompress, color, and participate in a discussion about art. So we really encourage you guys to ask questions. At the bottom of your screen is a chat feature. Drop any questions you have there, and Kelly, our Student Arts Council member, will ask them as time allows and as the conversation allows. If you are having any technical issues during this call, please direct message either Chloe or Marilyn, and they will be able to help you. All right, so now on to the main event. We are really excited to have our featured artist tonight as Jacob Phillips. So Jacob is an interdisciplinary artist whose work takes the viewer on a journey through an imaginary southern landscape from the perspective of a gay man. He is inspired by queer culture and camp aesthetics. Phillips earned a Master's of Arts degree in sculpture at the University of North Texas in 2021, as well as a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in sculpture from the University of Alabama at Birmingham in 2017, where he happened to be one of my AEIVA interns in 2015. So real excited and proud of him and how far he's come. He is currently the Art Studio Lab Supervisor here at UAB in the Department of Art and Art History, and is also an adjunct professor of sculpture. Jacob has exhibited throughout the Southeast, including shows at Wiregrass and, of course, at AEIVA, and he's been featured in Voyage Dallas magazine. So, without further ado, welcome, Jacob. I'm excited to learn more about your work, and particularly since BFA and kind of what inspires you. So, welcome.
Well, thank you for having me. I was really ecstatic when you offered me this opportunity, and I've attended a few in the past, and I've always been excited to learn about other people, and now people get to learn about what I do in my practice. So thank you again for hosting me.
Of course. Well, why don't you go ahead and share your screen, and let's get started with how did you get into art and why?
So I got into art, I want to say back my first year of college. I wasn't really in any art classes, or actually, there weren't any art classes offered in high school, but I've always been creative. And um, I was on a track for graphic design thanks to an advisor at George C. Wallace Community College in Dothan. And she recommended me transferring to UAB because of the state of art building that was being built at the time, which is AEIVA, and where the progress of the department was going. So I got to UAB and was on this graphic design path, started taking my foundation courses, and realized 2D, I do work in 2D, but 3D, the 3D realm really stuck with me. And I knew that this was the moment I wanted to take and the path I wanted to take. And so I started to take as many sculpture classes as I could. I got into the BFA program, and that really, uh, sorry, I was trying to advance. That really pushed me further down this path of sculpture. And so I graduated in 2017 with my BFA and was pursuing art around the country, and different avenues that way. Teaching at Bucks Rock Creative and Performing Arts Camp in Connecticut. I was teaching bronze and aluminum casting there. But yeah.
So I had actually forgotten about that early graphic design influence. So did it play a large part in kind of your early sculpture work? And I also, can you tell people a little bit more about that paper sculpture, because that was a real interesting one that we had to put together.
Yeah, so I was taking the graphic design class, and I just wasn't happy. I wasn't happy with the work I was producing myself. It wasn't up to par. I think it was around the time the Dalai Lama came to Birmingham, and it was also an 8 a.m. class. And I just, my heart wasn't there. My heart was elsewhere in the sculpture class. And so I was talking to the chair at the time and my advisor about switching over. And I think that's when my portfolio just blossomed. When I actually was in something that I was passionate about. I think I was looking more at graphic design for potentially being a route to being more financially stable, but getting on down the road, I don't see that. I think it's all at the same level. So this paper sculpture, that was about I think this was the second iteration of it. It was first shown at Space 111 with a faculty mentor show in a window installation, and then was rebuilt for the juried annual exhibition. And it consists of about 7 to 8,000 sheets of recycled paper that was going to be, or book pages that were going to be destroyed. And so it's hollow in the middle. I constructed it in the sculpture studio across the street from AEIVA. I built this big, what I thought was going to be a successful crate, getting it across the street. Well, no, I don't think any roads in Birmingham are paved smooth. They all have potholes. And so it rattled itself apart. And thanks to Christina and staff at the time, they helped me get it back up into this floating mass in the gallery.
Yeah, that was I think that was also early on in my career. And so that was a pretty interesting kind of have to fix issue that we did. But it ended up being wonderful, and it's incredibly massive. So, okay, tell us kind of your trajectory from there. Where did your art and why did your art start to shift maybe a little bit as you got into grad school?
So my art went from this organic realm to playing and exploring with materials. I've always, I mean, from my beginning sculpture classes in undergrad, I've always loved this idea of exploring materials. Um, I think I have an arsenal of different materials such as coal slag and diamond dust and all kinds of paints and graphites and anything that is textured based. I think I have it. And so I love to explore it and put it in the artwork and play with different forms. Oops. I want to go back to this image. This was the image on the right was my BFA thesis piece. It was a carved oak tree with paper pulp pressed into these grooves, and then this red clay that I collected and formed into. It was red dirt formed into clay that was then pushed along the tree, and as uh, time went on, the clay dried out, and it started to reveal um, this inner core. Um, just after grad school, I mean, just after undergrad, I was at Bucks Rock Creative and Performing Arts Camp, and I was teaching bronze casting and was playing around with wax, and I've been drawing these birds, watching people on trains and out in public, and drawing these personalities and meshing them into um, different kind of birds. So I was researching birds that took on uh, human traits and had human characteristics. And so I was starting this series, was proposed that for grad school, because I wanted to make these life size or human size birds. Uh, First week of grad school, they shut it. I got into grad school. I went to University of North Texas. Alicia Eggert, she shut me down immediately in my studio. She threw that idea out. She said, "You are not doing this." She said it was a great proposal, but you're in grad school to succeed, and I do not see this being the route you're going to go on. And so I reverted back to nature. Nature has always been a place of zen for me where I draw most of my inspiration. And so throughout the latter part of my grad school experience, one place really stuck with me, and it was Caddo Lake in East Texas. And this is a video I shot, and I plan on projecting it in a room where you're engulfed in this moment. And this is what I call a magical moment when I go and do my research. This is a canal that is about uh, I think 300 feet down or deep in the middle of Caddo Lake, and it's the one natural lake in Texas. It consists of all cypress trees, and I'll talk about in a minute why cypress trees are really important to me in my work.
So Jacob, why? So you already had started with organic material, whether it be paper or like the red clay or trees. And I remember you had these wonderful drawings of driftwood, I believe.
Mhm.
In I don't remember if it was your BFA show or if it was another show, but why always have you been drawn to nature, or were you about to tell us that and I just
Um,
interrupted?
I think placing myself in an organic environment, again, it's a place of zen for me, and it allows me to. It sounds cheesy, but become one with nature and itself, and allows me to grasp the idea of um, organic materials further and then I take that and push those ideas even further with an inorganic material. Now, I started that towards the end of grad school as well. I think I was in a 3-year program, and about halfway through it, I was like, light bulb. Um, but I'm drawn to mountains and rivers, especially finding a river on the side of the road with rocks and cliffs like these. I'll stop and I'll sit by it. I'll grab a sketchbook. I'll take videos and kind of study that landscape. And you see all these landscapes uh, throughout the South. I mean, driving from Texas and Alabama, when I would come home to visit family when I was in grad school, I mean, there would be several moments on that path that I could stop or would stop. Um, this is one of my this is Wacola Springs in Florida. We would visit there with, I think my aunt is on here, with my aunt when we were little, and I've always loved how crystal clear this water is, and that you could see these trees and these cypress knees arising through the water. Um, I tie back childhood memories to my work as well, and this was a really fond memory. Um, Going back to cypress knees, uh, I I've moved on from driftwood. I think driftwood for me I was drawn to it because of time and travel and the path it takes. It dies, it gets washed up on shore, creatures inhabit it, it gets washed back into the ocean, creatures inhabit it, live on it. It's being altered by life, both in the water and on land. And so I've resorted to cypress knees, and I've really studied them and began to place them in my work because cypress trees cannot live without these cypress roots or knees. These are the support system that branches out from the tree across the surface. They burrow down just a little bit in the surface, but they get really large above the land, and they become that stabilizer. I've started to tie those in to my work with my queer identity and unicorn horns. For me, I believe they have a direct correlation to my queer identity, and they both become a symbol of hope and purity and freedom and a support system. Uh, and so that allowed me to merge those two forms with, or that familiar form of a unicorn horn with the southern landscape imagery.
We have a question in the chat. Marilyn asked, have you ever traveled outside of the South for inspiration, like to the Rockies or Red Rocks of Utah?
I have not been, I mean, I've been to Colorado and Twin Lakes, Twin Lakes in Colorado. I went on a camping trip there and was really drawn in to aspens and how that whole changeover happens. I have not gone farther west, but I've been east and northeast, and the terrain has started to it changes, and then it goes back into similar landscapes. Especially when I go up to Connecticut to Bucks Rock, the landscape becomes similar and familiar. And so I do draw some inspiration from that as well. Give me a mountain and I'll live on it. This is actually an image that stuck with me for the last probably 4 or 5 years, and I'm really drawn to this because of the layers. I love these layers of peeling back and this texture that happens, especially as the cypress knees are growing and shedding and becoming stronger. Um,
So you were talking about the unicorns and the unicorn horns, and then the connection with being a gay man and your experience, and particularly within the South. So can you tell us kind of how that started to influence your work, getting your MFA, and kind of how it starts to change from there?
yeah. So my out day was July 29th, 2018, and changed my life forever. And I went into grad school a few months after that, and it kind of fueled everything. Um, I was trying to figure out how the community was where I was moving to. I was moving 800 miles away to someplace I had never been before. And so I started to dive into that landscape there. And my work really shifted to using organic materials on a larger scale, such as uh, Spanish moss and hay. I made these structures. It was one of my first structures in grad school. I deconstructed a hay bale, and because I was living on a hay farm at the time, and so deconstructed a hay bale and rebound 2-inch bundles into a large, what my colleagues would say, a phallic symbol, but it was supposed to be similar to Nick Cave's sound suits. They didn't move. It was just on a wooden, I want to say, structure. I took inspiration from George Ferrandi's Prosthetics of Joy, and I just started piecing these structures together with scrap wood, and then I covered it in chicken wire, and I started recording sounds of the landscapes around me, and embedding that in the material, and giving the viewer that sense of escape within that gallery space. Um, this piece came about, I want to say, a year after, or my first year of grad school, and it's a seed pod. I was really into seed pods and how um, they contain so much life, and potential growth. And this piece kind of morphed over time. It started off as live Spanish moss, and then it started to decay over time. I think I left the studio for a while, and it started to die off and change colors, and it became this beautiful dried. It looked like a dried seed pod, almost like a sunflower shell. And I started to embed lights, these moving lights, which gave them life. This was a solo show at the Dallas World Trade Center, in one of the showrooms, and it was titled Landscape and Identity, and it really explored who I am, um, and what I was trying to do and see within nature. So this entity in the middle is about an 8-foot tall sculpture. This light gave it breath, and it like lungs, and it felt like it was inhaling and exhaling It was just a cheap $5 light, Halloween light from uh, Walmart. And so that simple playing around and exploring really changed pretty much how I started to look at my thesis and my body of work that um, came in the future. So um, this is some of the hay forms that I was playing with my end of my first year, and it was dunking this hay in gallons and gallons of glue and morphing them into these structures and letting them dry, and then placing them in different environments. It was about becoming a unit and finding that sense of comfort in community. And I embedded lights in just playing around with this idea of color. Wasn't really sure how I would embed color into my work, because at this point I was still on this neutral um, neutral color in my work, and so I was like, "What am I doing? How are you going to incorporate color? Dissect the pride flag."
Also, how did you feel about moving away? Like, because I mean, obviously, in some of your other sculptures, you have other things like that. Paper sculpture had chicken wire and stuff, but that light is pretty prominently not an organic material. So, how did you feel about kind of going away from these more specific organic materials and start to incorporate other elements into it?
It was scary. It was probably the most scariest moment I had in the studio, because I didn't know what sort of reaction was going to happen. I was told that light cheapens the piece unless it's used in a way that makes it become one with the piece. And so at that point, I was trying to figure out, how do I embed this in the piece where you can't um, see the light source. And so I started to create these little pods that would slip. The lights would slip in, and you wouldn't see it. It was just this glowing light from the inside. But the pods themselves were made out of like either mud, like adobe type pods, that were just inserted in.
And then with these, you also started getting into more two-dimensional work, right?
Hmm. So I was taking a sketchbook and idea development class with Lauren Lake at the University of North Texas, and she was talking about this light bulb moment, and I just kept looking at her like she was crazy. And we were playing and exploring and doing 20 to 30 sketches a day, and being free with material. And she showed this tape transfer method with these images. And so I went out from my Caddo Lake trip and printed off a ton of these images of Caddo Lake, these cypress trees, and I just simply put packing tape on the image. And then I rubbed it, and then I soaked it in water, and I rubbed that paper off the back, and I was left with an image solely on a see-through image on the packing tape. Cut these strips up and started placing them, and then adding other materials onto it, such as liquid gold and artificial snow and gesso. And the image that's behind me currently, this image you're seeing on the screen, is the first iteration. Um, it is a 16 by 20 image. It's on tape. The piece that's behind me is 7 foot by 6 foot, I believe, and it's also image transfer with concrete and tar. And so this body of work, these little explorations, these happy light bulb moments, will turn into these large experimental drawings. And so each one of these tape transfers have little sayings. In them, they're embedded either within the cypress tree or cypress knee, or like in these little tiny moments that happen. I believe this one says, "I don't want to cry anymore." And these really tied back to my struggle of finding a sense of community and moving forward after coming out and facing who I really am and embracing that.
And I
I
think
was
that,
also
oh,
go ahead.
sorry. I feel like, and I don't know if I've said this to you before, that's also very much part of Southern landscape, right? So, this concept of Southern hospitality is all drawn around creating a community or finding a community or being brought into a community. And so I feel like, pairing this and your experience and your journey with the landscape kind of is in of itself also a Southern landscape. I don't know. What do you think?
No, I definitely think that as well. So I was looking at um, different sayings, like um, one of these secretly has "bless your heart" in it. Um, I believe it's this one. It says "amazing," which is broken up, um, and then underneath one of the pieces of tape, it says very faintly "bless your heart." Um, and this gesture of uh, yes, that's amazing. Congratulations, but bless your heart. Sorry for you. Like, what have you done? Um,
Love that.
there's a lot of pod forms that are drawn in with liquid gold and gesso. And then there's teardrop forms. This was a really emotional series for me because I was dealing with depression at the time, and again, moving forward and trying to pull myself out of um, a really crazy funk. Um, and this one just says, "Please." Like I have no more words. I please, and that goes on to, "Please love me for who I am. Please don't give up. Um, I haven't changed." And so I started to come up um, with other materials to play with it. So I was playing with chalk and on this watercolor paper, and then gesso, and meshing those two together and creating these figures. And so self-made is about being true to yourself, and you are the one that builds yourself up. Ultimately, you only have the power to do that, and other people can inspire you and other things can inspire you, but ultimately deep down inside of you, you're the one that builds up yourself and makes yourself who you are. And I truly believe that. I was also playing with uh, altering a book at the same time, and deconstructing, and just downright playing and spraying paint and sanding and gluing in different things, and then revealing it. So peeling these pages back, that I believe this was a National Geographic book that it was a hardbound one, which are really hard to come by. Um, but deconstructing that and having these organic moments on this organic literature, and watching things happen back and forth, I would be so excited when I walked into the studio to open up the book after it's been sitting for a couple of days drying, because as I would peel back, it would make that sound of an old book that's been wet, um, crinkling back. And then moments like what happened here on the right, this blue and black paint with some gray graphite or gray paint with black graphite on it, it formed this human figure in there with these almost like stalagmite, stalactite forms happening. This was the aha moment, light bulb moment that Lauren was talking about. And it really made a shift in my work, and fueled the rest of the work pretty much. There's another image of the book. I went to Penland School of Craft in North Carolina, and I was learning this Nigerian hand building and Ghana hand building technique. I came back to Dallas or Denton, and came back to my studio, and I was practicing those vessels. I was also researching voids at the time, and taking that technique I learned and coming back and practicing in my own studio, which I really wanted to get to this image because this is one of the coloring sheets. That image is what this looks like in real life. So it's so many different image transfers and shoe polish and tinfoil and liquid gold and oh gosh, what was the other material in there? I sanded it all down to create this gritty, almost abused surface, and was really pushing that idea with those. What that happened with those books and those images.
So, Jacob, how do you start an idea kind of as you go through these upcoming slides? Like, how do you, even to your work right now or before, do you start with like a sketch or do you just start making? What is your process like?
Oh, I want to say it depends on the day, but no, I'll start with like writing down almost like a web diagram of different ideas, and then I'll start with a sketch, and then I'll move. If I'm going into the digital realm, say like I did make a shift, and I'll talk about it if we have some time. I made a shift in my work with moving to 3D printing and laser etching. So I'll move to the digital realm. But it's really, the moments really happen when, or the ideas really happen when I'm just playing with material and putting things on and seeing how one material reacts with the other. You know, especially on this form, I didn't know I was going to use tar and concrete on packing tape that has been lacquered with house paint that was then sanded and then image transfers on top of. So just through that exploration, I think a piece happens. But ultimately, I have to start off with a web diagram. This new series I'm working on now, it's called the Birthday Cake Series, the Coming Out Birthday Cake Series, with these 3D prints. It all started off with a web diagram, and then community outreach. Once I get those ideas out and put them into these smaller pieces, I start to like imagine a space where they would live in. And so this was a tiny model for my thesis show, and these are clay forms that the pieces were then going to be made out of cardboard. But then the polar vortex happened in Texas, and that didn't happen. But this is one of those ways of imagining these works, is getting and making them small, putting them in a place, seeing if it'll work or not. I learned that from Stacey Holloway. And then this was a moment that I was just playing. This has some lasers on it. It doesn't shine right at the screen, but it's like moving light. Is that okay if I play it?
Yeah,
Okay.
go for it. Yeah.
This was me playing with light for my thesis show and seeing how it bounced off these forms that were coated in diamond dust.
How do you decide on materials now? Because you're like, I mean, I guess diamond dust is organic, but technically, but like you're starting to kind of move away from that original. I mean, you still have those motifs of trees and moss and things like that in your work, but you're starting now to kind of go in a different direction. So how did you come up with particularly diamond dust as a material, or going to liquid gold in the pottery?
Well, do you want the real answer or do you want the
Whichever answer you want to share.
The honest answer is literally going to the art supply store and finding I was like, I really hate gold leaf, applying gold leaf. It makes me incredibly angry. I don't know why. And then I found there's liquid gold. And I was like, oh my gosh, yes. If I can get away from applying, there's a specific liquid gold though that I have to use in my work. There's different variations of it. There's a specific one that actually gives you a texture of like gold leaf. But for like the diamond dust, I dressed those forms with diamond dust because I was specifically speaking to an idea or performance of subverting the homosexual male hiding in a heterosexual male body. In a world where acceptance of homosexuality is limited, but becoming more accepted. And so I was playing on the idea of camp and drag in this state. And so these forms that are crawling along the wall are wanting to emerge and overcome. It's this idea of man-made versus nature. And so I was looking and researching at Fort Worth water gardens at the time, and these concrete this concrete mass had these cypress knees that would crawl underneath the concrete and bust out of the corners of the concrete. And it was this show of force and the show of might coming through and the show of overcoming. I couldn't believe it with my eyes that it crawled under this massive amount of concrete and came out. Tiny little hole.
So, Jacob, we have about 15 minutes left. So I also want to make sure while we're going through, because I know you've got several of your kind of end of graduate school pieces coming up. Can you talk about, exactly why you decided to pursue that MFA and any advice you might have to students trying to decide whether to go get the MFA or not?
Yeah, so I towards the end of my BFA, I was like, I think I really want to go to grad school. I don't want to stop. I have a passion for teaching, and I really got that through teaching with Space 111 and doing some community work with special education, and watching my professors at the time have this drive and this passion for teaching what they love and believe in. I was like, I want to do that. I want to teach at a collegiate level and show my knowledge and my passion to students who also want the same thing. And so getting my MFA was at that point not a choice. It was what I had to do. And I applied all over the country and got rejected my first year. I got waitlisted, ultimately rejected. So I waited a year. Now that was the best decision I've ever done. I think I needed a year to grow, and I showed during that time. I taught, and I reapplied, and I got into University of North Texas in Tulane. And North Texas gave me so many different opportunities. I've got to meet Dohosa. I got to sit across the table from him and have a conversation in person, and um, got to go on these trips to the International Sculpture Conference, where I would have never met the people I met if I wasn't actually in grad school. There were so many different connections and opportunities and teaching moments. I was able to teach my own curriculum for three years as a teaching fellow with UNT, and I think that prepared me to be where I'm at today, and to lead my class that I'm teaching now successfully.
That's wonderful. So I know you've got another piece that you're about to show us. Yeah, that one that's in also part of the coloring pages. So tell us a little bit about it, and then I have another question for you after.
Okay, so this was the 3D model of the very first moment of Portal to the Soul coming to life, and this was on a program called Mesh Mixer. I was taking Cypress knees and digitally warping them, and then printed it out and liquid gold leaf the image, and it became a very large sculpture constructed in the studio at my parents', and my parents are laughing right now. Thanks to the help of my family and my dad and mom and my grandmother, I was able to drive home on a Thanksgiving break and construct this monster. It's still a steel frame with expanding foam and concrete, and I think a sealant. Drove it back to Texas. It cracked really bad. With advice from Stacy, I was able to successfully repair it with a smooth-on material, and it became this. Let's see if I can find it real fast. This giant mirror. And so as you approach this mirror, you're projected into this environment where you're able to feel yourself, like you're able to be yourself and feel comfortable in your own skin. It's a neutral environment that has these lights that are moving around, and they're not that pulsing light that I showed the video in. They're this soothing, colorful, almost rainbow effect that happens. The title of my thesis show was Unicorn Magic. And it encapsulated my queer identity through a fabricated landscape. And I think Portal to the Soul was that moment of okay, it's a new beginning. This is where I want to go. It's almost the new future of where I'm going in life and where my art is going.
That's amazing. Oh yes, go ahead, Kelly.
We have another question in the chat. Stacey Holloway says that the Trim Tab staff wants to know what keeps your creative drive going.
What keeps my creative drive going? Oh gosh, I sound like I'm in a pageant right now. Just believing in myself and not giving up. I've had moments just outside of grad school where I'm like, okay, where do I go from here? I think everybody who leaves grad school, where am I going? I was thankful to have the opportunity to come to UAB and work and teach here. But one of the other main things is seeing my students succeed in the classroom and seeing those happy moments when they discover something new. It makes me want to go back into the studio and explore and find something new of myself to work into and explore. And so I've got, I don't know if you can see my screen, but I've got one of the forms I'm working on now. This is part of the birthday cake series. And I took it to the studio the other morning and sat next to a student. He said, "What are you working on?" And I was like, "I'm actually sitting down and working on my own artwork for a minute." And I said, "I'm going to sit here next to you and I'll show you different materials and see how it works on this," because he had a similar form. And he's like, "I've never seen this material in my life." I said, "It's amazing, isn't it?" I said, so those little moments are what really drives me. And exploring, I will never not explore.
I have a question that piggybacks kind of off of that. How have you navigated becoming a professional artist now that you've left grad school?
So applying for grants and shows and going to, say, the Dallas Art Fair and picking up where I left off. I feel like this thesis show was the new beginning I needed. And I took some months off and started to navigate a whole new series based off of this thesis show. It doesn't necessarily deal with the same thing. It dives deeper into stories from gay men all across the South, and what they would put or have put on their birthday cake for when they came out. And one of them that really sticks out to me is, "I just want to be loved. That's all." And that one struck me. And so when you look down into the void and these cypress knees, this landscape, you look down into it. There's a mirror with a birthday cake image on it, and it has the saying on the cake. And so you see yourself projected. And so I love this idea of projection and putting yourself in that moment. And so I think that will stick with me going forward. And I applied to a couple of shows overseas with this body of work, and just applying. You just have to apply for everything. Lots of applications and opportunities out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Last question for me, unless there's any more in the chat. How has the pandemic, since this whole series started during the pandemic, how has the pandemic influenced your artwork?
The pandemic really shifted my outlook on my artwork. I had to shut down my studio and move it to Dallas, about 45 minutes away from. Sorry, I'm going through these pretty fast. I was going to get to the images of my studio at the time. So we had 30 minutes to go to Denton to get our stuff from our studio quickly as we can. It was a covert operation because we were not supposed to be on campus. And we got all of our stuff, and we had to make our home studios. And so I set up shop in my living room in Dallas and worked there for several months until we were able to come back onto campus. And these are forms over here on the right. These were forms that I had already fired like a week before the pandemic started. And so I was just trying to play with this idea and see what I could do with what I had. Because, I mean, I had a 20-foot by 10-foot studio at UNT that had all my stuff in it, and I could only bring so much home in my little car. I was told, grab what you can to survive for the next 6 months in your studio. And so some of the work that came out were these ceramic vessels. Again, more ceramic vessels, playing with different materials. Portal to the Soul came out of the pandemic. That's when I really started to take an online digital fabrication course and play with a new idea of sculpt with a CAD software, and then have that inspire your work further. And so I printed it this small, and it became between 8 and 9 feet tall. And so I've been using digital as my sketch and these 3D prints as my sketches. After grad school, I started to use the 3D prints as the actual work to work smaller, because my mom always said, and actually has pleaded for me to work smaller. I think I've done a 15-foot piece, several 8-foot pieces. So I am
going something that can come in the house.
Yeah. So I'm beginning to work really small and intimate and make those little moments happen.
That's wonderful. Jacob, it has been so wonderful having you on. We are at time. Kelly, was there any last questions in the chat?
No, the chat's empty.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Jacob. Before we leave, if you were coloring on anything, would you mind holding it up and showing what you created? And so this is what I did. Oh, awesome, Jacob. Yes, excellent. Multiple pieces. That's awesome. Great. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Jacob. I really enjoyed going through this journey with you and getting a little bit more look at your artwork. How can people follow you?
Thank you. So people can follow me on Instagram. I deleted Facebook years ago. Can I put it in the chat?
Yeah, do it. Yeah, drop it into the chat.
This is my Instagram, and you can follow me on there. There's a link to my website. Here's my website as well, and they're both linked to each other.
Since this is being recorded for the recording, it's j.m.phillips is the Instagram link. And then, guys, if you colored or are still in the middle of creating art or coloring during this event, please post it on Instagram. Tag us at AEIVA UAB. Tag Jacob, and we would love to share kind of what you guys worked on tonight. So thank you so much, Jacob, for joining us, and we are excited that you're back at UAB, at least for now, and teaching and working alongside us. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for this opportunity, and thanks for everyone for coming.
Yes, thank you. Everyone have a great night.